it's like, okay, how do I optimize myself in this world of AI? I need to obviously use it. I need to be faster. I need to be smarter, more accurate.
Yeah.
But there's still a place for somebody who can build a relationship over time, create that trust. You have a high EQ, you've got soft skills, you can be an intermediary between individuals at a high level across organizations who maybe wouldn't normally be able to talk, and you can negotiate on their behalf. That is going to be very hard to automate.
I love going global. And this week's guest is one of the very few that I've interviewed based in Hong Kong. You'd have to go back through our archive to find our last guest that were based over there. This is Mark Francis, who is an exited founder and current founder of an HR tech platform, but has scaled and exited and continued to grow recruitment businesses across Asia. What a wonderful man. He is pragmatic. And during this episode, he's going to talk through the evolution of how technology has shaped our industry. He talks around where his predictions are in terms of our industry and where it's heading literally in the next couple of years, what that trajectory looks like. And I have to say, if that terrifies you, please don't. It's all very reassuring, but we have to be open and honest about where we're at now as a society. No matter where you're listening to this, you're going to love Mark. He's great. So without further ado, let's jump in. This is Lysha Holmes, and I'm your host on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast. And one of the reasons that I don't do it in a beautiful, shiny office is I want to be able to attract global voices to you, our audience. And here we are today. I think possibly our second or third guest coming from Hong Kong, which is very exciting. This is Mark Francis, who is an exited founder and founder at the moment of a number of different brands, which he's going to explain to us. Originally from Wales, I believe. Well, no, born in Hong Kong, but originally from Wales. And I think we're going to learn so much from Mark's leadership story today. So I can't wait for you to get to know him. So welcome to you today, Mark. How are you?
Very good, Lysha. Thanks for having me on the show. Really looking forward to sharing my story from Hong Kong.
I'm very looking forward to it as well. So I can already tell I might have to cut it short. I can already tell it's going to be one of those episodes. I'm going to run out of time here. So yes, give us some backstory as to who you are and what you do.
Cool. So yeah, as you mentioned, my dad was from a small village in Wales, came to Hong Kong in the late 60s. So I was born in Hong Kong and grew up here. Spent a lot of time going to the UK, spent a bit of time living in Malaysia as well as in China and Shanghai, learned a bit of Mandarin and came back to Hong Kong. And kind of fell into recruitment, which is what happens to so many people. You know, you kind of fall into it after university, right? Yeah, exactly. It happens to so many people. So I was about 22 years old when I got my first role working for a British boutique firm called Carrington Fox. If anybody out there listening knows that firm. So did basically financial services headhunting for 5.5 years with them. And as happens to many people in the industry, you kind of get that bug, like, I could do this myself. Surely I could do this myself, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's when you get to take this whole other journey, you know, going from being a recruitment consultant to an entrepreneur, which sounds really exciting and sexy. And then you actually do it and you realize it's extremely stressful. And there's a lot that you have to learn while you're doing it. So I took that plunge about 14 years ago and set up a headhunting company called Silverstrand here in Hong Kong. And we were doing, again, financial services, but mainly with the hedge funds in Asia. And, you know, we did fairly well. It was always a boutique, small executive search type firm. So, you know, it tended to be a few placements per year, but, you know, pretty decent size fees that you were working with. And sort of the story kind of took a bit of a pivot from there. You know, I set up another recruitment brand after about 4 years, working in the ESG, sustainability and built environment, completely separate business partners, completely separate co-founders. And we took that business on a journey, you know, obviously through COVID as well. And yeah, look, that business eventually was sold to an Australian recruitment entrepreneur in the summer of 2024.
Congratulations.
Still hold on to that, thanks. And yeah, again, as is the way of things sometimes, when you become an entrepreneur, and I think a lot of people listening are probably the same, you kind of end up doing 2, 3, 4, 5 different things. You're advising here, you're sitting on a board there. So I had these 2 recruitment firms in Asia, and I could see that I wanted to build a contractor book. And again, anybody who's been involved in recruitment knows that if you ever want to sell a business, you know, having a perm business, you're looking at sort of a 3 times EBITDA. But if you've got a contractor book, it's double that or more. So it's very valuable. And in Asia, you know, contracting, it took a bit longer to catch on than it did in, you know, the UK or the US or even Australia. Yeah, Asia Pacific was a few years behind. So sort of 8 years ago, we could see that there was all of these people that wanted to set up contracting books, but there was no way you could get access to the cash flow financing. In the UK, you've got Sonovate, which a lot of people will know, very
Yeah.
well done, ex-recruiters
hmm
who set up a fintech firm. So basically kind of followed a similar path here in Asia and put together a lending platform called Zettle,
Okay.
which launched in Hong Kong and Singapore in 2019. And basically, we just funded recruitment firms. So we were funding all of these like privately owned recruitment companies in Asia.
Great.
Probably people
Yep.
I knew already, like
hmm
people that had also done a similar thing, right? Had worked for a few years, set up their own firm, got to a certain point, said, well, perm is okay, but I really want that contractor piece. And so what we were doing is we would finance all of these contractor books and, took that business on a bit of a journey. And sort of now I'm in a bit of a non-executive director role of there, which is obviously given me the
Congratulations.
time to do
Yeah.
Preferred.
Absolutely.
So
Preferred.
here we go.
Great.
Here we go. It all ties together. So yeah, Preferred is basically an HR tech platform, which is kind of taking the learnings from fintech in the last 8 years, along with the recruitment industry from the last kind of well, now 19 years, and sort of trying to apply it. I think a lot of us are, probably also seeing that there's been a lot of changes in recruitment, particularly with AI. Everyone's talking about it, right? AI, and what it's doing to the recruitment industry.
Yep.
And it's kind of what we set this up as well, as we could see that there was a lot of goods and there's a lot of potentially powerful tools. And then there's also these new problems, like the one I keep coming across nowadays is the AI-generated CV that applies to the AI-generated job description via an AI agent, and you just get this repetitive flow of
Absolutely.
perfect profiles, and they
Yeah.
land in the
Yeah.
inbox of the employer and they can't really get past it. So that was kind of why we set up Preferred to deal with it. So I just talked at you for a very long time then, Lysha.
No,
Sorry
it was
about that.
it was no, 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 it was actually great. It was a really great, succinct, potted history of what was that, like 19 years. That was very impressive and
Yes,
very interesting.
basically.
And I love the, your sense of humor came through as well there, and the fact that you've clearly sat on multiple sides of the desk there. You've done boutique, you've worked for the larger firms, you've set up on your own, you've exited that business, you've seen opportunity. I love the fact that there's kind of this holistic approach that from the fintech opportunity, and you're absolutely right in terms of not everybody does get an opportunity to scale and sell their business, but you're still making sure that you're offering almost like this suite of opportunity for founders to listen to. So just to be clear on Preferred, then it's an HR platform, did you say? Right.
Yeah, so
Okay.
it's HR tech, primarily involved in the
Okay.
recruitment side. So we've
Okay.
set it up not to try and change the wheel. Executive search is a
Mm,
very good place, and a lot of recruitment does as well. But there's a
mhm.
lot of that kind of more transactional type recruitment, and that's kind of what we're trying to address. So it's a way to basically create a way of creating secondary income for many people in the platform. So what I mean is there's a place for headhunting and consulting, recruitment
Yep.
consulting. What we're trying to do is provide more of a compound network effects. So with the app, we've got the AI scoring, which a lot of companies have been doing, right? Everybody's trying to do AI scoring. And you can do it, but it's still a bit imperfect because AI hallucinates, and that's the issues we've got at the moment. But it's getting better, and you can kind of train it. So we've got that. And then what we've done is we've got something called incentivized referrals. So we're tracking referrals, and then we're basically dispersing payments to individuals in our network. So what that means is, let's say there's a role on our platform for a customer success manager at
Okay.
a prop tech company in Singapore. So you can, if you're a job seeker, you're actively looking for roles anyway. So you come across this role, it could be right for you, but maybe it's not. But you can refer that role to other people via WhatsApp, LinkedIn, Messenger, and Instagram. And you can actually share the role with people in your network who you think are qualified. And if they were to get hired, you would actually receive 50% of our success fee that we
Oh
receive,
wow.
right? Which
Oh
is quite
wow.
generous. It's
Gosh.
quite generous, yeah.
Very. Mhm.
And so, but then but this is where it gets a bit interesting. Is we've also created trackable to second, third, and fourth degree. So let's say you see a role on the platform and you refer somebody that you know, and they go, "Well, I've just got another job or a promotion. It's not quite for me,
Yeah.
but I
Mhm.
know that so and so just lost their job. I'm going to refer it to them." And all of a sudden, somebody else that you never met gets hired. All of you will receive a fractional portion of the
Oh
fee.
wow,
And
that's
so that's
incredible.
where sort of the compound network effects
Powerful.
comes in. Yeah.
Yeah, that's
So that's what
incredible. So
we've been doing. Yeah.
what year did you launch Preferred then? How long's it been going?
Only last year. We are
Oh
super young
wow, you're
startup.
super
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
embryonic.
all
That's so
happening now.
exciting.
AI companies are like that now. Everything's happening like 3, 4
Very
times the speed of
fast.
what it used to.
It is.
Previously you'd set up a company and you'd hope to sort of get some revenue in the first year, and maybe you turn a profit by year 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Now everyone is expecting you to turn a profit by year 2, get revenues in, certainly within the first few months if you can. It's
Yeah.
everything has sort of changed now. The goalposts have moved.
They definitely have, and that's where technology has helped to do that. So your headquarters are in Hong Kong, is that right?
Yeah, so we're Hong Kong at the moment. We're just
Mm.
about to expand to the UAE. So we had a
Okay.
call earlier today about that, to Dubai. And then
Very
after that, we're going to be
exciting.
going to Australia and the UK actually as well. I've actually got a
Oh.
lady based in Bath. So UK is definitely on our radar.
Ah. Oh, I'm very pleased to hear it. Well, I mean, our audience is global, truly global. So there will be people listening from all those areas that you've just mentioned. So maybe even Powys, who knows if there's anyone listening in
Ah,
Wales.
lovely.
Yeah, you should say something in Welsh right now, but I daren't. So don't want to offend anybody. So I guess what you've done in terms of your career, if we kind of take a step back and sort of look introvertly, you've seen the whole industry shift and be shaped by technology in one way or form. When you came into the industry 20 odd years ago, that was probably when job boards were starting. I mean, we hadn't even got LinkedIn. LinkedIn's only been around about maybe 15, 16 years. So where do you see us in terms of that evolution? Now, you've mentioned AI, but we have to, take into account, things like CRM systems, etc. Like, where do you see us right now in that trajectory? And then how do you think it will continue to shape our industry?
Yeah, I mean, look, when I started off, it was just, we had a Bloomberg terminal, an Excel spreadsheet, and a landline, and that was how we did all our
Mm,
headhunting. And,
mm,
back in those days, we didn't even have smartphones, right? It was just, you came into the office, sometimes you're coming in at 9, you're staying until 10, 11 to do the calls you had to do. There was none of this, working on the cloud. So, we've seen how the industry has changed. You're right, LinkedIn was the biggest, real big change. People
yeah.
putting their CVs on display publicly. I knew people in the office I was working with, all the people, they're like, no one would ever do that. That's insane. Why would you put your CV on public display? And actually, everybody just did it, right? And we kind of we changed that. It was like a paradigm shift. And that's what kind of
It
happens,
was.
right? Is all of a sudden this new technology becomes weird and novel, but then it gets increasingly used by the population. Before you know it, you've crossed that threshold, and it is what
Adopted.
everybody uses, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there wasn't really much of a change for many, many years after LinkedIn until like Gen AI came on the scene. What was that, 3 years
Mm-hmm.
ago now? And
Mm,
Gen AI was kind of a big change. Most people I know were using it to kind of draft emails, help to
yeah.
draft their job descriptions, things like that. Then you kind of have now AI agents, which is taking it another level. And then I think the way I see things going, and again, I hate to kind of still focus on AI, but with like the general artificial intelligence, right? That's what's coming next, where it's literally going to be so intelligent, so fast. It's going to be a chatbot. It's going to be agentic. It's going to have everything else included. So the truth is, it's really hard to see what the next 2 to 3 years is going to have for us because it's all moving so quickly. So that's kind of my view on it. But what I do think is going to happen is, and we're already seeing this, right? A lot of early stage jobs, entry level jobs have been affected, right? You can see that across industries. There are fewer
Mm-hmm.
and fewer opportunities for young people, particularly Gen Z, under 25 years old. So they're
Mm-hmm.
being impacted the most. You're seeing that kind of middle tier, which is all trying to use these tools, and then you've got the sort of senior execs at the top, which are just sort of trying to hold on, for as long as they can. And I think that what's going to happen is we're going to have to see new wealth creation come about, which is going to be, I think, a lot more entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. I think we're going to see
Mm,
more and more people, some out of necessity and some out of desire, create their own revenue streams, from their own
yes.
businesses, which will then
Mm,
feed into a growing economy, right? More spending, more opportunities. But we just haven't seen that yet. We're still in that kind of stage of job
mm,
destruction, a lower
mm.
level job destruction, especially.
Yeah.
And then we're
Yeah.
going to start to see it tick up again. I think in the next couple of years, probably not this year, but soon, we're going to start to see that trickle down, and we're going to see a lot more wealth creation, many more companies out there. And some of the larger companies might shrink, they might adapt, as they bring in sort of new streamlined workflows and things like that. And then there's going to be a whole bunch of new opportunities that come about. So that's kind of what I see happening. And I think that
Mm,
everybody is going to have a side income. Everyone's going to have a hustle.
hustle.
Everyone's going to have to do a few different things. I don't think you're going to
Mm,
have, there's no more job for life. And I think everyone's pretty much knows that now.
mm. Yeah, I remember listening to a podcast with Mo Gawdat, and he was talking around that maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and at the time I was like, I
Mm.
had to keep pausing it because I was like, oh my god, it's like it felt so monumental what he was predicting, and there's like,
Yeah.
but it was a little bit catastrophic, his tone. I don't know if you listened to
Ah,
it. It was very much Armageddon-y, and it was like, the
okay.
world we know is gonna by 2027, there'll be no jobs left, and there needs to be universal income. And I'm just like, shit, as a parent of young people, and
Yeah.
I'm placing people, and I think that what you've described, I think ultimately we all have an ethical responsibility to supporting people. But I think actually, I've talked about this a lot, that I think Gen Z and millennials have always had some sort of side hustle, not least maybe to
Yeah.
fund their way through university. I mean, my daughters never went to university, and I think I don't think universities will exist in a decade. I really don't. For the reason that
Information
you've
age,
given,
right? It's all available.
information age. Yeah, it's. I just think it's a traditional institution that possibly doesn't fit the modern world. I'm not sure the education system does. So I found that really interesting. And when as you've positioned it, it doesn't feel daunting, because the reality is that it's happening right now. And I think that's really exciting as an entrepreneurial person myself, and as someone who supports new founders to create that opportunity. And you're creating your microcosm. I do wonder on the sort of larger scale corporate businesses, because it's almost like polar opposites. Like if you look at the big food companies, are they going to still exist when you've got all these, independent, and we seem to be going reversing back to fresher, organic,
Whole foods and things. Yeah.
provenance. Yeah, a couple of weeks ago, we had on the podcast a lady that recruits for the fresh ingredients industry. She's a boutique search business, and that was a very
Wow.
tasty episode, because just the thought of interviewing, these incredible farmers who are doing new product development, going to be getting new fruit and veg, and it's
Yeah.
like, wow. But I think I almost feel like I wish we could have a crystal ball to see where we're at right now in a moment in time, because it's the biggest change since the industrial revolution. And you've gone through those changes. And do you remember like people going, LinkedIn's going to kill recruitment, and job
Yep.
boards are going to
That's
kill
right.
recruitment? And it's I think we've got a responsibility to say nothing's going to kill people getting jobs or people needing roles. It's about how we adapt. And in the same way, working in factories 150 years ago, before the 5-day working week was made into enshrined in law in the UK anyway, you would have said to somebody on the street then, this is what will happen. They'll be like, you're crazy, but it happened. So I think that's really interesting. Where are you on? And you might be able to relate this back to obviously what Preferred actually does, but in terms of the narrative around diversity and inclusion, we seem to have not stopped talking about it. And I think because of how AI can be so effective in theory, removing any unconscious bias, but actually, from what you've just said there, I'm using AI to write my CV to an AI-generated job description. Am I just not going to be clever and give the prompts that it needs and take out all the bias? Do you know what I mean? Like, where do you see that right now as a tech?
Yeah, it's interesting, right?
brain?
Because at the end of the day, all these models are built by developers and engineers that have their own inherent biases, right? So even the models that have been created are created by developers that have a bias, and
Yeah.
predominantly they are men, and predominantly they are men that are originally from China and India. Actually, the majority of the developers who build the AI tools, they are, and so there is a bias there. So of course that changes once the information is fed into those models. But again,
Right.
as has been shown, they can be shown to hallucinate, to make mistakes. Obviously Grok, that was a big one recently where, there was a lot of problems with what Grok was doing, right? And that's a
Yeah.
whole other conversation. But you see that with all of the other AIs, these issues are also there. And so that's why I still think it's imperfect. I think there's a lot of issues with it. And so what we're doing, we also use AI, as I mentioned, but at the same time, we're trying to put like a human circuit breaker. We're trying to put a human back into that process. Now, traditionally, you would have a recruitment consultant to do that, right? You would have, if you wanted to hire somebody, you'd have a jobs board, or you have a headhunter, or you maybe try and have your own referral program. But they're
Yep.
kind of ineffective, and they didn't always scale so well. And so that's kind of where the market was historically. The issue that we're seeing, at least this is more from an Asia perspective, but I'm interested to see if it's you're also encountering this for the other guests you speak to, is that a lot of the end clients are it's getting harder and harder to win those contracts as a consultant, as a recruitment consultant now. There are perhaps fewer firms on the PSL than there might have been before. Every role is a lot harder to win the tender, and that's kind of the change that we're seeing. And of course, we know that a lot of the organizations are dealing internally with budgets and HR budgets, and whether they need to cut here or there. And I guess the first marker was when we saw a lot of the talent acquisition team head, getting cut. That was one of the first, canaries in the coal mine, right? When you see the TAs functions, all these organizations getting severely reduced, that's a big warning sign, right? We can all sort of see that. I remember seeing that it was about 2.5 years ago or so. I remember seeing there was all of these redundancies happening, and obviously
Yeah.
then that got us concerned. That got us concerned. A lot of other people that I knew, and that's, I don't know if we've kind of reversed that yet. It doesn't feel quite as negative and pessimistic as I feel personally as it was a couple of years ago.
Agreed.
It feels like the last kind of 6 months there's been some bright sparks again. There seems to be, at least in this part of the world, the end of the second half of last year was actually pretty decent. Because I speak to a lot of other recruitment business owners here, either because they're friends or in the industry, or even because of Zettel, the lending business. We lend to many of them. So we kind of we talk to each other all the time. And it does feel like the second half of 2025 was sort of encouraging. And kind of what I'm hearing is, the first half of 2026 could be quite good. At least what I've been hearing on the street the last month or so is encouraging. And so, what it shows is that the recruitment consultant industry is very resilient. The recruitment market is resilient. Despite all these challenges, it's still growing. You look at the cumulative annual growth rate year on year, the market is still growing. There are still companies looking to hire. You look at like Japan. Japan's like the second biggest recruitment market in the world. They're getting 35% fees there. They're getting retainers, and there's so much activity going on, right? There's so much activity. So there's still definitely opportunity to be had there, despite some of the negativity that you do, read about and see. That's kind of my feeling. And I think that the best recruiters are the ones that obviously adapt to new technology, like with LinkedIn when it came in. The best ones are the ones who go, I've got to get my profile on here. I've got to connect everybody I know. I've got to import all of my contacts. This is going to be a game changer. And the ones who did that and they built that personal brand, they started to see the rewards from it. And then now what's happening is it's a similar kind of process of change, right? It's like, okay, how do I optimize myself in this world of AI? I need to obviously use it. I need to be faster. I need to be smarter, more accurate. But there's still a place for somebody who can build a relationship over time, create that trust. You have a high EQ, you've got soft skills, you could be an intermediary between individuals at a high level across organizations who maybe wouldn't normally be able to talk, and you can negotiate on their behalf. That is going to be very hard to automate. You're not going to be able to automate that out, even with a general artificial intelligence chatbot, which is going to come at some point. You can't do that because you can't take them to a coffee or a beer.
You can't, and you can't nuance it, and you can't read body language, and you can't pick up on the unsaid. A very perceptive, use the word EQ. And gosh, we don't talk about EQ enough. And, how do you train that into an agent? I just don't think it can be done. It's just such a nuanced thing. And that comes from the expertise. So I think it's, I'm really pleased that you sort of delivered on that. And thank you for giving that synopsis. I think it's always interesting speaking to people, and people, I think, turn to podcasts not only to learn and to get insights, but also some sort of reassurance. Like I mentioned, that podcast that I referred to, it sent me into a panic, and I actually told people not to listen to it. I said, don't listen if you're worried about AI. For so many people at the time, I think back 2 years ago, people were just now everybody's adapted to it and incorporated it. You'd like to think anyway. Incorporated it to take away the tasks that we don't need to spend time doing, so we can get out and do more face-to-face meetings and go to more events and have more conversations, do more podcasts. It's not perfect. In fact, one of my podcasts earlier on today, the guest has emailed and gone to the AI summary. We didn't talk about that, and I'm like, oh, I know. Goodness knows what it's picked up on there. My ramblings of some sort, but you have to, it's not perfect, is it? So I think that's the whole point. So in terms of, you're obviously somebody who has, done what most people don't get to do. I think in the UK it's something like 4% of people actually manage to scale and exit. What would your advice be to people who are possibly on that trajectory, or are thinking that that's something that they'd like to do? If you could go back to the Mark pre-exit, what would you do differently, or what would your key considerations be?
I think the business I exited was a recruitment business, so I'll obviously talk from the recruitment perspective. I've had this experience with a fintech, but I haven't officially exited it yet, so I can't quite talk about that. But I'll start with the recruitment side. I think most people know this already, but get a contractor book in place as soon as you can. It's sticky, recurring revenue. It looks great on your balance sheet. if you really
Yeah.
want to sell a business, it's going to give you something really worth selling, because if
Mm-hmm.
you're selling a perm business, you're really just selling yourself and
Yeah.
whatever
Agreed.
relationships you have, right?
Yeah.
And so you can do that. And there's obviously companies that do that. They roll up these businesses. But
Yeah.
realistically, you've got to get a perm book going as soon as you can. Obviously,
Contractor book.
try and get an inch wide, mile deep knowledge of a sector. I think
Right.
what we're also going to see is a change from the generalists that are covering every single sector, of all levels. You're going to start to see specialists who are so deeply ingrained into that sector. They know all the major players. The major players know who they are. They are going to have a very strong moat, and that moat's going to protect them in sort of all the changes that are coming in. So I
Yeah.
would say those are probably two of the most important things to keep in mind.
Love
In
that.
Asia, I actually know people that are looking to roll up businesses. I think that you'll see, sort of cash heavy businesses. They could be sort of VC backed recruitment or companies, or even EOR companies, employer of record companies.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of these firms are looking to sort of acquire these types of businesses.
Yeah.
And then you've even got a few of the sort of recruitment private equity type companies. Obviously, everyone knows like Hamilton Bradshaw in the UK, but there's also a few in Asia as well.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah.
they're looking for businesses. So that's probably another one. And I would say to try and scale, whether that's going into partnership with other businesses, trying to find a way to perhaps merge. If you can get into a sort of beyond a certain size, it's also going to help you as well in any of these conversations.
Yeah.
That's probably something to keep in mind. And yeah, look, the calendar, it just takes, these conversations go on forever. They really do. You can start a conversation now and it won't close for like a year, maybe even a year and a half.
I was going to say,
it's just sometimes how it goes.
It's being realistic. Have you got any advice for anyone that's thinking of launching in Asia? Maybe with what you just said there about 35% fees, how easy is it to launch a business over there?
Yeah, I mean, look, Japan gets people very excited because of that. Japan is actually about to loosen the immigration rules there. They've obviously been
All right.
known for being, quite difficult to get
Super
foreigners
strict.
in there. They're changing the rules because the demographics are shrinking. The Japanese population is shrinking. So they're
Right.
actually started to loosen the immigration laws there. So it's getting easier now to bring in overseas talent.
Good.
It's one of those places where you need to be on the ground. You've got to build relationships. It takes time. There are some very good headhunters and recruiters there now already. People like Simon Charles. If you haven't interviewed him, he's a good one to interview.
Okay.
He's been there and done that himself already, and I can introduce you to Simon. But yeah,
Great.
he's kind of been there and done that. He's based in Japan. That's good people to speak to. Hong Kong and Singapore have always been really good markets for headhunters. It's really easy to set up a company, to get a recruitment license. Even though they're small by population, they're good business centers, and you can kind of get yourself a nice foundation, and you can even start looking at roles outside of those cities, the rest of the region. So those are, I would say Singapore's a bit trickier these days. It's a bit harder to get a visa than it used to be. Hong Kong is actually still pretty good. I think last year we had more companies incorporated in Hong Kong than ever in history. 2025, there were more companies incorporated. Yeah, they just announced it a few weeks ago. And many of those are also recruitment companies too. So there's opportunity
That's
there.
wonderful to
But
hear.
it is good.
Great.
We needed it. We've had a lot of bad press the last few years, so we
I
actually
was going
needed
to
some good
say,
news.
no, that's really encouraging. And I think that not everybody wants to go to America, not everybody wants to go to Dubai, not everybody wants to go to Sydney. There's options out there, and I think from a cultural perspective, what you've said, I love the fact that you said boots on the ground. That shows that the potential clients that you want to market to want that relationship. They want that partnership approach. So is it mainly financial services, legal? Is it professional services over there? Is there anything going on?
I mean, obviously each country is a bit different. Hong Kong
Mm.
is accounting, finance heavy, a bit of tech.
Yeah.
Insurance is also growing here. You've obviously got in Singapore, of course, also industrial as well on the doorstep of China. Singapore, you've got more sort of health tech, biosciences, commodities. Those are quite hot. Obviously, legal as well. And then I think if you look at the next few years, where's going to be a really good opportunity, it's going to be Southeast Asia, ASEAN. So you look at like the countries that are they're growing rapidly. They've got a young population that are digital native. They're looking to change jobs. The salaries are still a bit low, obviously, compared to the developed markets. That's why I'm thinking like 5 years ahead. But there's huge opportunity in places like Indonesia, even the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand. Like all of these places are like over 100 million people. There's a lot of people there.
Huge opportunity.
Yeah, and a great lifestyle
great.
too, if people want it.
Say,
So if that's what people are thinking of.
I'm off to book a
Yeah,
plane
go to
ticket, I think,
Thailand, sit on the
Mark.
beach of Phuket.
I certainly don't think I'd have to have a blanket over my knees if I was in Phuket, that's for sure. Mark, you have been so wonderful and so much value. I think so many people will absolutely, take a lot of what you've said on board today. And there's, it's very agnostic what you've said as well, and very reassuring. And most importantly, it sounds very optimistic, which I think we could all do with some optimism. So thank you so much for joining us on the Recruiters Recruitment Podcast.